at the forefront of politics.
Our enemy is Trump. He is the enemy. We got to unite. If we're not a united party, we lose to Trump.
On the front lines of activism.
There's certain fights, if we don't engage, they win. This is a fundamental question of who we are.
And delivering your daily dose of comedy.
Donald Trump, when he had his physical, they had his blood pressure, and mine is higher than his. Oh. And the irony is mine is higher because of him.
From the blue wave.
We flipped. Enough seats to take control of the House. We control the House.
To 2020 and beyond. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the show, brothers and sisters. Thursday, August 15th. I'm Dean Obeidallah, your MBFF. I'm here for you. We got a lot to talk about. Donald Trump, even though on vacation, still makes time for bigotry and racism. You got to give it to that guy, because racism doesn't take a holiday. Bigotry doesn't take a vacation. Donald Trump is always doubling and tripling down on racism and bigotry. It's the white supremacy, stupid, to paraphrase, it's the economy, stupid, from Bill Clinton. We saw that today with his attacks on African-American Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and Middle Eastern American, Palestinian American Rashida Tlaib. Both have been on the show, both who I know. And you know, Donald Trump called for the banning. And by the way, their trip was not to Israel proper. Their trip was going to the West Bank to visit Hebron, Ramallah, Bethlehem, where my family's from, right outside of Bethlehem, as well as East Jerusalem, which is considered under international law, under occupation. It's primarily an Arab-dominated city. So, you know, but to come in, you have to go through Tel Aviv. And even to get to the West Bank, you have to have permission, because ultimately security is controlled by Israel there and Benjamin Netanyahu. So what we saw today is, it's kind of odd, because last month the Israeli ambassador Ron Dermer said that they would allow the two congresswomen to come to the United States to visit Israel and the West Bank and Palestine. They had no problem, and they said out of respect for the U.S. Congress. But that all changed this morning. It all changed when Donald Trump took to Twitter and spewed some lies and hate, and that's what he does, because there's no break. Again, there's no holiday from racism with Donald Trump. He's 24/7 racism and bigotry. Tweeted, it would show great weakness if Israel allowed Representative Omar and Tlaib to visit. They hate Israel and Jewish people, just lies. There's nothing that can be said or done to change their minds. Blah, blah, blah. They're a disgrace. Think about it for a second. Just take a step back. This is the President of the United States. I hate saying those words about him, but he is. Calling for two members of the United States Congress not to be permitted to enter a foreign country because they have criticized Trump really more than anything. They've criticized Trump far more than Israel. But because of that criticism, he wants to silence them. And then Netanyahu jumped into action because they were going to let them in. It was Trump that demanded they not be allowed in. Netanyahu, who's part of the Republican Party, he's part of the Republican apparatus at this point. As a reminder, don't forget, he came to the U.S. to give a speech to Congress when President Obama was there for the specific purpose of embarrassing the first African-American president. That's what Netanyahu, and we'll talk about Netanyahu's record in a second, because it's something I'm well-versed about, because I've written a lot about him. So Netanyahu jumps in, goes, okay, you're banned. Banning Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. You know, because nothing says a country is the only democracy in the Middle East like banning entry of U.S. members of Congress who simply criticized your policies. Neither one have ever advocated any kind of violence. In fact, the opposite. And what's remarkable, and let me share as a Palestinian American, what I've heard for years, because we would see these horrific attacks, suicide bombers, they're vile. Attacks on Israeli innocent people, vile, horrible. And they go, where is the Palestinian MLK? Where is the Palestinian Gandhi, who deals with nonviolent actions, talks about things like Gandhi did, like MLK did, you know, like boycotts, like MLK did. And now Palestinians are doing that, and their allies are doing that. And they're like, no, we don't want that either. What they want is silence. What they want is Palestinians and the allies who stand with us to go quietly in the night, to be silenced, not to speak out, not to call out Netanyahu and his horrific policies. He's been there forever. So, I mean, I can't even remember when the state of Israel had a different prime minister. Now, we know who Trump is. I don't have to remind anyone. And I will remind you a little bit about Netanyahu. And I will say this, if anyone felt frustrated or anger today watching Trump and Netanyahu ban Congressman Omar and Tlaib, I would say this, if you felt anger, felt frustration, here's my response to that. Good. I'm glad you did, because you got a slight taste, teeny taste, what it's like to be Palestinian living in the West Bank, where you have no control of your freedom of movement or your freedom of travel any single day. My family, who lives there, and I've been there, have no idea if they can go to work today because Israel might close the checkpoints. They don't have no idea if they can go to school because Israel might just arbitrarily choose to close checkpoints. They don't know if they can go to the doctor because the Netanyahu administration might close the checkpoints. So the frustration anyone felt because you're compassionate and empathetic about what was happening and that you found it to be fundamentally unfair and wrong, my family and millions of Palestinians, about 2.5 million live in the West Bank, go through that daily. And the 1.5 million in Gaza, they're caged all the time. So there's no internal checkpoints. In the West Bank, there are internal checkpoints and external. And so here, one thing to clear up Trump's lies about Congressman Omar and Tlaib being anti-Jewish. Here is clip number 1, Kirsten Walker today on MSNBC. Clip 1, please.
Now, first, a little bit of a fact check. Neither has ever said that they hate Israel or the Israeli people. They have been critical of the Israeli government. They recently voted, in essence, in favor of a boycott of the Israeli state over its treatment of Palestinians. And they have made some controversial comments about Israelis, Omar having to walk back some of those comments.
Congressman Omar made comments all about the Benjamins, that apologized for that. Tlaib has never said anything about Jews or Israel at all, but they've lumped them all together. At least Welker did push back a little bit there. What Rashida Tlaib does talks about her grandmother. And I talk about my grandmother. My grandmother, who was born in what was then Palestine, and it was always Palestine until 1947, 48. The West Bank area was still Palestine, but taken over by Jordan after that war. We won't do a history lesson here, but just to get into that. But after the 67 war, when the West Bank, where my family's from, was taken by Israel, my grandmother's land was taken and turned into a settlement. She did nothing wrong. She was simply colonized because people with power wanted her land. She was simply the wrong religion at the wrong place. And so were countless other Palestinian Muslims and Christians. They were in the wrong religion in the wrong place, and their land was taken by people who had power and weapons, supported by bigger powers in this world. And then you had a drumbeat of building of settlements in the West Bank since 67, but really sped up in the 70s, 80s. And then remarkably, and I'm not making this history lesson, after the Oslo Accord in 1993, which contemplated the Israeli government would return the West Bank to the Palestinians to be their homeland, they really sped up settlement construction then to make that virtually impossible. And it was all by design. And U.S. governments were fine with it. It was George Herbert Walker Bush was the first one to really stand up to that before Oslo, but he stood up to settlement building that was going on. So to remind you a little bit, Benjamin Netanyahu and how him and Trump are so cut from the same racist cloth. And Beto O'Rourke has called Netanyahu a racist, and I applaud that. Netanyahu in the 2015 election, on election day, he feared he was going to lose. And he said, his quote, "The right-wing government is in danger." He's a right-winger. He said, "Arab voters are coming out in droves to the polls. Left-wing organizations are busting them out." So he is decrying the Arabs who live there, who are citizens, like my fiancée Hind, who's Israeli, but she's Palestinian and Arab. And they're citizens. They have every right to vote. He's decrying. This is no different than a white supremacist in the South going, "The black people are voting. Come on, white people, where are you?" That's what he was saying to his base. And guess what? He was rewarded. He won that election. Just a few months ago, as the Washington Post documents in a great article, Netanyahu, through a law he signed and championed, said Israel is not a nation of all its citizens. It's no longer a multicultural, multi-religious nation. He said that it's only a nation of the Jewish people. That's his words, and they have a nation-state law. He also portrayed, at that time, his opponent, who's again his opponent, because they had an election. He couldn't build the parliament majority coalition, so they're having election September 17th. He called his primary opponent, Benny Gantz. He said he's beholden to the Arabs and wants to destroy Israel. And right before that election, he teamed up with a group called Jewish Power, which is a violent, racist ties from Kahani. You may have heard that name years and years ago. The Kahani movement. It is literally, the Kahani movement was deemed a terrorist by the U.S. And Jewish Power's leaders have long expressed support for violence against Palestinians, violence against my family, expulsion of my fiancée and her family because they're Israeli Arabs, expelling them because of their race and their religion. They want to ban intermarriage of different faiths, and they're horribly anti-LGBT. And Netanyahu doesn't care. One of the leaders of Jewish Power has said homosexuality is a disease of choice. A disease of choice, my friends. And Netanyahu sides up with this kind of scumbag. That's who Donald Trump's buddy is. That's who Netanyahu, that's who they are. So when Netanyahu did this, he's looking at his election, September 17th, giving red meat to his base, and it's angry. It's like Trump base. Think about American, same thing. And Trump doing it as well for his base, who, of course, is horribly anti-Muslim, anti-black, anti-brown. That's what they were about. And also to tie this all together, these two women are two of the same four women that Donald Trump just in July, a month ago, was doing all that they should go back to where they came from. In fact, let's remind you, because we might hear this chant tonight at Trump's rally. Here's clip number 3.
Streets.
There you go, the white supremacist rally. That happened in July. And you know, it's interesting. Trump said he wanted them to go back. Rashida Tlaib was trying to go back to her ancestral home. She's born in Detroit, but she was trying to go back to her ancestral home. And then Trump says, no, you can't go there either. It is so hard to figure out white supremacist talk. I don't know what they want of brown and black people. What do you want from us, Trump? You say go back. She wants to go back. And they go, no, you can't go back. This is what's going on. And now, look, Trump does this because his instinct is bigotry. His instinct is racism. We've seen it from when he's discriminating in the 70s against African Americans who want to rent properties in the building that him and his father own. Right through Central Park 5. It's all documented right through today. So part of this instinctually, let me slam an African American woman, let me slam a brown woman, and it makes people happy. It makes me happy. There's also a little bit of strategy here because there's one thing Trump looks at. It's polls, because he tweets about his poll numbers all the time. He loves Rasmussen poll because it's right-leaning. Well, over the last week, since the big shooting in El Paso and his horrible response to it, he's been sliding in the polls. He sees it because he looks at Rasmussen. In fact, at one point in the Rasmussen poll, a little over a week and a half ago, he was at 50 and even 51% approval. As of yesterday, he was down to 45%. Now, these are oversampling to the right. That's not really his numbers. And then today, actually later yesterday, but it was reported today, Fox News came out with a new monthly poll. And a month ago, Donald Trump had a 48% approval rating in the Fox News poll, only a 47% disapproval. He had a +1 positive, Fox News. New poll just comes out last night. Trump has slid 43% approval, 56% disapproval. 56. It jumped 9 points. It's remarkable in a month. And what's even more remarkable is you look at those strongly approve of Trump versus those who strongly disapprove. And that gap is an enthusiasm gap, so you want to see where that's going. 21% of Americans strongly approve of Trump. 48% strongly disapprove. Nearly half of America doesn't just disapprove of Trump, strongly disapproves. There's a 27% enthusiasm gap on our side. It's not even our side, on the side of America, of Americans. Americans are on the side of this side. The people who like Trump, and that's what, Trump and Netanyahu cut from the same cloth. They're not about American values. They're about Trump values. Trump's values of bigotry, racism, and cruelty. That's what they are. And, and we have this kind of, what's remarkable today, so you have this issue with two women being banned from one being Palestinian, going to be banned. And you don't see any Palestinian voices in any of the discussions on cable news today about this, because the humanity of my family and the Palestinian people have been denied. They've been demonized. And we are not allowed. There is not one Palestinian American contributor on any of the major news networks. None. Because we're an inconvenient truth to the narrative that people want to tell you about the Middle East conflict. And I don't demonize anything. I just tell you the facts. I don't use conclusory terms. I simply tell you about what my family's going through, when I visit them, what's going on, what happened to my grandmother. Only things I've seen or know specifically. I have no desire to demonize. My goal is to bring people together. In fact, what Trump is doing is destroying the interfaith work of Muslim and Jewish groups and Jewish and black groups by doing this, by dividing groups as much as possible. So going back to the poll numbers, Trump's numbers go down. He does this. Why would he do it? Because when he did the whole send her back stuff, he went up 5 points in a Rasmussen poll and a Reuters poll among Republicans who rallied around him because they love this. They love it. They love when he went up. Those 4 women, 2 African American, and 3 African American, 1 born in Africa, and Rashida Tlaib. He went up in the polls. So all I can tell you, as the economy weakens, expect Trump to do more and more of demonizing brown and black people. Because as the economy weakens, he's got nothing else. I mean, this is like political strategy 101. If the economy continues to weaken, all he has is racism. That's all there is. There's nothing else to do, right? So if he keeps doing that, he has to make poor white people feel better about themselves. The same sentiment behind Jim Crow, the idea of that rich white people were concerned about black and white people who were poor being bonding together, working together. So they invent Jim Crow to make poor white people feel a little bit better about themselves. And say, look, your life sucks, but look what we're doing. Look how we're punishing these black people. We're actually killing them. Look, you got to feel better about yourself. That's what this is about. I am happy that leading Democrats put out statements pretty swiftly condemning both Netanyahu and Trump. Bernie Sanders said it's a sign of enormous disrespect to these elected officials. Liz Warren said it's a shameful, unprecedented move. All the 2020 Democrats just about have come out. You had even like stalwart supporters of Israel, like Gerald Nadler, saying this move is utterly egregious. Nito Lowry said it's missing an opportunity for engagement. Speaker Pelosi said Israel's denial of entry to Congressman Tlaib and Omar is a sign of weakness and beneath the dignity of the great state of Israel, adding the president's statement about congresswomen are a sign of ignorance and disrespect and beneath the dignity of the office of the president. AOC said Trump is exporting his bigotry and making matters worse. And Congressman Omar in a statement said it's an affront that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, under pressure from Trump, would deny entry to representatives of the United States government. Trump's Muslim ban is what Israel is implementing, this time against two duly elected members of Congress. Adding, the irony is that the only democracy in the Middle East making such a decision is that both it's an insult to democratic values and a chilling response to a visit by government officials from an allied nation. And I think you need more than words. Every year, over $3 billion of our tax dollars go to the state of Israel. Every year, $3 billion go there. I think there should be conditions imposed that Netanyahu administration cannot deny any U.S. member of Congress from going to visit. We're giving $3 billion a year. It's the least you can do. Secondly, they should make clear no American citizen should be denied entry based on race, religion, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. In fact, I would be fine if any country we give aid to, you impose those very same conditions. So you can do it as part of the foreign aid bill. Say these are conditions for every country. From now on, you cannot deny entry to any U.S. member of Congress. We've never heard of a U.S. member of Congress being denied entry to any other country you give aid to. Never happened. We would know about it. They'd all be talking about it. Never happened. And that they cannot deny entry to any U.S. citizen, any country we give aid to, based on race, religion, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. And I also think for political ideas, like if someone's advocating nonviolent change, that's one thing. If they're advocating violence, of course, don't let them in. I completely understand that. If anyone's advocating violence, no. If they were advocating true hate and trying to incite violence, no. But, and the BDS movement that Congressman Omar and Tlaib are talking about, it's boycott, divestment movement, it's always termed, and this is how media narratives work, it's always termed as anti-Israel or critical of Israel. What it is, it's a pro-Palestinian human rights movement. And the details of what the BDS movement wants is on their website. It's not the destruction of the state of Israel. It doesn't say that at all. If it did, we have a different discussion. It says the idea of giving freedom of movement and equality to Palestinians. And giving back the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, even talked about the Golan Heights, but that's kind of gone now. And it has very detailed on their main website what they're about. But it's been told to people that it's somehow going to destroy Israel. Israel is economically doing fine. They're doing very well. BDS has been for a few years. I wrote an article for The Forward about it, a progressive Jewish publication I write for periodically, about 2 or 3 months ago about BDS and how since BDS started, Israel's economy is going fine. They're not having that kind of impact. They're just raising awareness. And again, for years, for decades, Palestinians have been told, give up the violence, copy MLK. And now Palestinians are doing that. And they're going, no, don't do that. What do they want? I mean, when we had violence, it was very easy to define all of us as violent. And that made life easier. Now it makes it much harder. We're advocating a nonviolent, and I'm not part of BDS, but I defend the right of fellow Americans to engage in any kind of boycott. And if you don't like Palestinians, you can boycott Palestinians. That's what America's about. Our Supreme Court has said a boycott is recognized as freedom of speech. So states that have passed laws to use government action to punish those who would criticize the state of Israel, one law after the other has been struck down by federal courts. And that's the way it should be. You do not have state action saying what you can or cannot say, especially about a foreign government. Are you kidding me? But that's where we are. So in this case, you have a unique, for what it's worth, at least someone of Palestinian heritage to talk about this issue in not just political terms, but in human terms. And what it means for my family, many of my cousins born into occupation in the West Bank, living their entire life under occupation. It's all they know. And unless things change, they will die under occupation. With no freedom of movement, no freedom to travel unless they're given permission, no ability to use the major airports. That's their life. And under Trump, it's been made much worse. He cut aid to the UN Relief Agency, $350 million. Every year, presidents have given them money, administrations. He cut it. Trump cut $25 million to hospitals in East Jerusalem, run by Christian groups, but he cut it anyway just to make the Palestinians suffer more. And to be clear, this is not a religious dispute. There are hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Christians. You may have heard of one, Jesus, Bethlehem. They're there. There are Palestinian Christians there in Bethlehem. They're also within Israel, in Nazareth, a big Palestinian. I've been there. Big Palestinian Christian population. So there are Palestinian Christians and Muslims as well. There are Christians in Gaza. There are Catholic schools in Gaza. It's not something you get to hear about in the media much because that's not the story they want. So I'd love to hear from you. How much worse do you think Trump will get in the big picture between now and the election if the economy continues to falter? And it looks like it is, and I'm not wishing for it, but objectively it is faltering. And what do you think about this whole issue about banning Omar and Netanyahu and Trump just being BFFs? Love to hear from you. 866-997-4748.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
Voting is the most important civil right of our era because the right to vote preserves all other rights. It's not the Second Amendment. It's not guns. It's voting.
Sirius XM Progress.